You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA. You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to episode 392 of the Fabulous Peltoncast, sponsored by our friends at Pagliacci Pizza. I'm your co-host, Kevin Belton.
And I'm Tristan Carasino.
And we're coming to you from Renton, Washington, home of the Super Bowl 48 champion Seattle Seahawks.
I'm coming off a weekend in which I have watched so many sports that I plan on being so on one for this podcast. You're making me record on the Sunday. Literally, this is like, emotionally speaking, we talked about August as the Sunday scaries of months, right? This is like one of the most crucial, restful days in the entire year. The Sunday after Thanksgiving break, when you're about to get back after it. There's two days. The Sunday, literally New Year's Day night, or the second if New Year's happens to fall on a weekend and you get the holiday, when you're going back to work after Christmas break, and the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And I said I had plans to sit in my living room and watch Roadhouse tonight. And you were like, but no, we need to record a podcast after you have been to sporting events 3 out of the last 4 days and spent the other one of those days cheering against Oregon. And here I am.
Well, it's early in the pod.
I've seen a lot this weekend, and not a lot of it was positive. So here we are.
That's despite the fact that the Huskies won to improve to 12-0 this season.
Really just hanging on by a thread at 12-0, and then also just really the hopes of any team from Seattle doing anything good hanging on by a thread as well.
Well, women's basketball is undefeated. Had a great time over there on the Big Island. Yeah, well, the listener is coming back to work on Monday after a long weekend. The listener needs something to listen to. And the listener needs our takes because, again, a lot has gone on in Seattle sports, and you've attended basically all of it.
We all have the same takes.
I don't know if we have exactly the same takes.
Everything is bad and Oregon's going to win.
Oh, I don't think everyone else feels exactly the same.
Wait, really?
Other people are like shocked at how high the line is.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the discussion in the Discord. We were not shocked. We definitely had this conversation on Saturday about how high the line was going to go.
I said it was going to skyrocket. 7.5. I was like, that motherfucker's about to jump. And it did.
It did, in fact, jump. That is accurate. Well, no beer this week. One of the difficulties as we get into these later stages of the search for Seattle's best IPA is some of the beers become more difficult.
You literally have to search.
I do, yes.
An actual search for Seattle's best IPA.
And I did not, the traffic was too bad to consider going up to Ravenna Brewing and checking out their IPA options after the Apple Cup on Saturday. So I don't have any beer this week. We'll be back to it hopefully next week. But we start this week with some sad news. Is on Friday, his family shared that longtime Como 4 weatherman Steve Poole died at age 70 after battling early onset Alzheimer's that led to his retirement in 2019. And, the timing was interesting because of the fact that Steve Poole was the vocal Husky fan on a Como broadcast that the late Kathy Gertson was a Coug. I think Eric Johnson may be a Coug as well with their broadcasting department. So he was always there repping the Huskies amongst a sea of Cougs on Como, in addition to obviously being one of the most famous alumni from your alma mater, Tyee High School.
Exactly. Not surprising that there were a lot of Cougs on a Sinclair broadcast, but
they were not owned by Sinclair at that point.
I'm just saying. I don't think it's a coincidence. Anyway, probably I was going to say the most famous Tyee alum. I'm classifying somebody else as infamous.
Yes, that's fair.
But probably up there with the most famous Tyee High School alum of all time. There were yearbooks that we thumbed through. We found Steve Poole in the yearbooks from the 70s. And ultimately, just seeing all the photos of Steve Poole, again, this is a devastating loss. Not necessarily that I was paying attention to Steve Poole, his output, but just as a person and a human being, knowing that there's goodness in this world. Having Steve Poole walking this earth is such an amazing thing, and that is the huge loss. Seeing all the photos of Steve Poole and just how happy he looked all the time and how much positive energy he was putting out there was really an incredible thing. Just seemed like an awesome dude.
Yeah, and someone who was a fixture he was started at Como literally before we were born, and until his retirement in 2019, there on a regular basis, doing national weather at times, but sticking with the local broadcast. So this was someone who was, a familiar face to everyone in Seattle for a long period of time. Knew Steve Poole.
I think Steve Poole is 100% approval rating. There are not that many people out there who have 100% approval rating. And to me, Steve Poole is Seattle in a lot of ways. The Seattle that we grew up with was Steve Poole. You have Bill Nye, pretty close to 100% approval rating, right?
Yeah.
Steve Poole. That is broadcasting.
Steve Rabel?
I think Steve Rabel is probably pretty high up there also. But that is Seattle broadcasting for our generation. Those three names in particular.
Who out there was anti-Gene Anderson?
But just Gene Anderson didn't have the magnitude necessarily that Steve Poole had. Again, Steve Poole just seemed like such a likable person in every facet.
Absolutely.
That, again, I think he was a fixture of Seattle. And to me, that is the Seattle that we grew up with, is Steve Poole Seattle.
So our thoughts with Steve Poole's family after his passing. In happier news, congrats to Jake Browning and Drew Sample, who became the first pair of UW products to ever combine on an NFL regular season touchdown on Sunday, according to Husky SID Jeff Bechtold.
I'm kind of shocked by that.
I mean, we definitely took note of it when Browning to Sample was a touchdown. But
I would have assumed that, there have been a lot of Husky quarterbacks in the NFL for long periods of time that at no point Mark Brunell never linked up.
Warren Moon?
Yeah, Warren Moon? That's kind of wild, actually.
Yeah, kind of bonkers.
So, between all of those players, Warren Moon, Mark Brunell, Damon Heward, Jake Locker, that never once did two Huskies link up, that's kind of an incredible stat.
Yeah. All right, that's all we have as far as toasts are on the food update. As we record this, there is still 1 day left. If you're looking to get the little Crunchwrap Supreme, got a positive review from Randy Cote on the Peltoncast Discord.
There we go.
Yeah, I have not gotten that this year, but this week I am planning to get the final burger in fast food month, the Woody's style, which clearly inspired by the Peltoncast double burger, their version of the In-N-Out double animal style. So I think they introduced this last year, and it was quite good.
The little Crunchwrap slaps all caps. Thank you, Randy, for that. That's awesome.
If you're not on the Discord, be sure to check out that link and join us. We're still adding members. It's a robust discussion, great for during games, during the Husky game on Saturday, UW football game on Saturday, during the Seahawks game on Thursday. Also, there was a robust Mariners discussion.
Was there?
The
I was at all
Saturday.
of these events, so I have no idea what was going on.
I was monitoring the Discord from the East End Zone.
I was just cold.
I mean, I was cold too, but I wore so many layers that I maybe was not as cold as you.
I wore nowhere near enough layers. Of the 3 sporting events that I went to, I think there's something about Husky Stadium being open and on the water in particular, I think makes it colder.
Yeah.
But our seats at the top of the East End Zone,
yeah,
I think that those seats have to be up there with the coldest in the entire building.
But it was also a warmer part of the day than you were at Lumen Field for the Seahawks and Sounders.
I dressed a lot warmer for both of the Lumen Field games. At no point was I cold for either of them, except watching the performances. Cold on the inside.
Well, you know who's feeling cold on the inside? Many Mariners fans. After Wednesday's news that you broke to me, I drove to Portland for the Blazers Jazz game on Wednesday night. And just as I was arriving in Portland, you called me to talk about the reaction on the Discord to the Mariners trading Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks for catcher Sebi Zavala and minor league reliever Carlos Vargas in what looks mostly like a salary dump for the Mariners. We can talk about the 2 players they got in the return, but largely this seems to be about getting off of Suarez's $11.3 million salary next season and the small guarantee he was due in 2025 if his team option was declined.
Okay, so I've seen all the arguments against Gino going forward, right?
I mean, against Gino going forward is a tough way to put it.
I have seen all of the arguments that people have laid out that you wouldn't assume that Eugenio Suarez is going to be a better hitter in 2024 than he was in 2023.
So to go through this, I think you would actually still expect him to be a slightly better hitter, but maybe not that appreciably better than newly added Luis Urias, who now looks like not a utility player for the Mariners, but most likely their starting third baseman, barring another move. Suarez will turn 33 in July. He led the AL in strikeouts for a second consecutive season, albeit with a slightly lower K rate. The fact that he played all 162 games was a factor there. But the big concern was his power drop. His 159 isolated slugging, so that's your slugging minus your batting average, was the lowest of his MLB career. So too was his 3.2% home run rate in terms of at-bats. So his weighted on-base average projection from Fangraphs of 319 only marginally better than Urias's 314 projection, and obviously he'll be much cheaper with, a projected arbitration salary of $4.7 million next season.
So there are those arguments about Gino going forward, and I completely understand that. Look, I'm not saying necessarily that you can look at third base with Gino and be like, check, we are done, right? Played very good defense. I think statistically ended up being a better hitter than defender last year. But
at least by the Baseball Reference version of WAR, his defense was not nearly as good as kind of the eye test would lead you to believe.
But also he played good defense. We know he played good defense.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of these games.
It's likely a downgrade to Urias at third base, I would say. And I didn't check the Fangraphs split between offense and defense to see if they concurred.
Played generally pretty good defense, or I would say even very good defense. Was a steady third baseman for the Mariners. Was still the kind of player in the lineup that you look at it and you're like, who am I looking at in this order who could hit a double at any time? Who could hit a homer at any time?
Whose at-bats do I not want to miss?
Yeah. And Gino is definitely one of those players. Even beyond that, look, I understand sports are a cold business, but like, if you're the Mariners, the fan rating is quite low right now. The amount of people who I have heard personally tell me that they got season tickets or 20 game packs or whatever, some sort of ticket package for the season that just finished, coming off of the playoff appearance, who are not renewing those tickets for the following year, because there's a reality to it where you're like, of course I want to go to 20 games or whatever. Of course I want this pot of money to spend for the Mariners. Then when you have to do that and realize how many fucking games 20 is over a summer, all of a sudden it seems like kind of a lot. I think the Mariners' ticket renewal rate must be quite low for those types of people. I think it spiked and then went down. And players like Gino Suarez are players that fans like to see.
I mean, I think if you want to take the positive view on this, number one, like, when the Mariners got Gino Suarez, he was just the throw-in in the Jesse Winker trade, which is, of course, amusing on many levels at this point. He was the salary that the Mariners had to take back to do that. And this is one of the things I believe. It's related to the Peltoncast golden rule. Like, if players play well, you're going to fall in love with them, even though if they replace players who you previously liked.
I agree with that. But here's the reality. This is not that much money.
No.
Like, it is a salary dump for a few $1 million. It's not like Gino is getting paid. This wasn't getting off the Robinson Cano deal.
Correct.
Right? Like, it is a relatively, in the grand scheme of things, a very small amount of money. So even on their pocket, when there's this idea that, again, people are like, well, maybe they're looking at putting together a larger offer for a free agent. That is a very rosy perspective of Mariners ownership, and we will see.
We will see. They haven't earned the benefit of the doubt. I will agree with that.
But also, if they're like, well, now we could pay Shohei $700 million. We got off that Gino 11. Like, the math just doesn't add up between those two. And I think if they are reasonably going to be putting in a competitive offer for a big name free agent, I don't think the Gino money actually matters that much. And that to me is the issue here, which is why now? Because what the Mariners are lacking at the major league level is enough quality bats. That is what they do not have. They just don't have enough good hitters and enough good players on the roster overall. And right now, so far this offseason, they are regressing in that category. There's nothing that has happened and again, this is just the very beginning of the offseason. There's so much that can happen from here forth. I would be shocked. I would not be shocked. I take that back. I would be surprised if they didn't make a trade for a bat at some point this offseason.
Or sign one in free agency. I mean,
but also, I felt the same way last year. And we've been burned once and, about being fooled twice. Like the last offseason, what we were sold was Colton Wong and AJ Pollock and Tommy LaStella, right? And if that's what's happening again, and you're subtracting Teoscar Hernandez and Eugenio Suarez, all of a sudden this is not a better Major League Baseball team.
You're creating more holes to fill at some point. Like if the argument is, oh, we can't sign Shohei because there's too many holes to fill, like, and maybe Suarez to Urias is not that big of a downgrade, but even at best, that's a neutral.
Both of them. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's not a rule against. It's not like we could never find a place for Luis Urias to play. Gino Suarez is here.
Look, again, this is good news for one person and one important person only.
Haggerty?
Sam Haggerty.
That's fine. But like, I love Sam Haggerty.
You want the Mariners to be good more than you want Sam Haggerty to be on the roster?
Probably. Sam Haggerty's he's like the cherry on top of a team, right? I don't want him to be the consolation prize for the team. I don't want it to be like, well, they lost another 90 games, but at least Sam Haggerty was there.
I mean,
I'm not going to be paying attention if that's the case.
I think the scenario is, well, they finished 3 games out of the third wild card.
Whatever. Yeah, they didn't. They won 54% of their games and still missed the playoffs. But Sam Haggerty was there. But like, they could have both of those players on the roster. I also think they probably could have traded Gino a month from now, 3 months from now, July. Like, there's so many opportunities for them to have made this trade that it just didn't need to happen right now. And that's the thing that I think is the most upsetting about it, is like, go into the season with Gino. Unless there is something coming that we don't know about, go into the season with both of them. You don't need to clear that spot to get Luis Urias on the field. Luis Urias.
I know you made the Luis Urias joke.
Luis Urias, with his versatility, will find a way onto the field if he's good, right? That is not a concern.
Yeah.
Like, he will find a spot to play. And if he's playing well, he will continue. Caballero played so much last year, right? There's always at-bats for players that are versatile. But taking away a quality major league player is not something that the Mariners are in the position to be doing right now, because all of a sudden they are a worse batting team than they were last year without Teoscar Hernandez and without Eugenio Suarez. And if that's the case, this team is not going to get better this offseason. So something needs to happen, and I do not think this $11 million that they're saving, or less, right? What is the net savings here?
About $6 million.
This $6 million that they're saving is not going to be that big of a difference for anybody aside from maybe John Stanton.
The other thing here is the Mariners are aware Ty France is still their starting first baseman, right? Like, again, we'll see early in the offseason. Like, you're so concerned about strikeouts, but not concerned about just general above replacement play?
Being concerned with strikeouts is like a football team being so concerned with turnovers and punting every time. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. We've lived it.
So it's I get it. They're trying to get off some of these strikeouts. Maybe that was the reason that they were bad. But I think they weren't bad even. Like, the team was generally pretty good overall. But they still had a severe lack of depth overall at the major league level. And they are subtracting from that depth.
Depth in their lineup, yeah. We should talk briefly about the players that got returned. Zavala, the catcher, is very Mariners-y in terms of he is coming off a relative down season. He had 1 WAR in his best season in 2022 before slipping before replacement last season. Was designated for assignment by the White Sox in September and claimed off waivers by the Diamondbacks. He hit .270 in 2022, but it was pretty empty. Has hit .210 overall in his major league career. Did back in 2001 became the first player in Major League history to hit his first 3 career home runs, all in the same game.
In what year?
2021.
Okay.
Reporting is that the Mariners will move on from backup catcher Tom Murphy with the additions of Zavala and fellow newcomer.
Also, wasn't Tom Murphy a better hitter last year than Seby Zavala?
Yes.
Tom Murphy was like a pretty good hitter when he played.
But I guess he's going to make too much behind Cal Raleigh. As for Vargas, the reliever they got, he broke camp with the Diamondbacks last spring, lasted just 5 appearances. Also fits a Mariners profile as a reliever with good stuff who's struggled to harness it. Had 32 walks in 42 1/3 innings last season.
I mean, when you look at Tom Murphy's OPS, that has to be up there with the best on the team.
I mean, he was DHing for periods of time last season. So, yeah.
Moving on.
They got some work to do. And I hope that they are hearing this fan frustration and paying attention.
But it's another subtraction of relatively quality hitting, given the amount of plate appearances that Tom Murphy had. He's at 1.4 offensive WAR. Like, there were many games where I was like, thank God for Tom Murphy.
Yeah.
Last year. Who do you think had a better OPS, Julio Rodriguez or Tom Murphy?
I still think Julio had a better OPS than Tom Murphy.
I truly do not know.
I mean, part of that offensive WAR is being a catcher and the low standards offensively for catchers.
Do you want to answer that question again?
It was Tom Murphy?
Tom Murphy had a better OPS.
Wow.
I mean, but he only played in 75 games. I get it. Like, I'm willing to couch that and to understand the context, but he had an 858 OPS. Also, is like, the previous year, 873 OPS. Previous year was 894. That is back-to-back seasons that he had a better OPS than Julio Rodriguez. 818 last year for Julio.
Wow.
So he had a better OPS. It was only 14 games in 2022.
Yeah.
But, what the fuck?
The Mariners have some work to do. Then they
How
do
does
not
that
earn the
make
benefit
sense?
of the doubt.
How does that make sense to move on from Tom Murphy?
Did he strike out too much?
I mean,
maybe we'll trade Julio since he strikes out too much.
Is he in arbitration years right now, Tom Murphy?
No, I believe he's a full-on free agent.
He's just a free agent.
Yes.
But, like, whatever. Maybe they should trade Julio.
And then you'll become a fan of wherever Julio gets traded.
I mean, it's like one of those things where you're like, if you're just gonna fuck this up, maybe like they don't need one Julio Rodriguez. They need like 6 Julio Rodriguez's right now.
I don't know that they need 6 Julio Rodriguez's. On. All right.
I just literally they have proven that they have the offseason has to go very positively from this point forward. There is a lot of pressure on them, given what they have done to the roster, to make sure you don't have to finish the roster by the beginning of the season. I can accept that. They can make they traded for Luis Castillo mid-season 2 years ago. They also, in the midst of a playoff run that they seem to not want to participate in, also they made multiple salary dumping moves last year during the season.
They did.
Right? 2 times with relievers did they make salary dump moves during the season. This team is not committed to winning. I'm sorry, but that's a reality of it. They are not committed to winning. At their foremost goal is not to win baseball games. Their foremost goal is to win as many baseball games as possible while still being a relatively cheap payroll. There's no other way to describe it. Is there not?
I mean, I think they care about youth as well. I think the 54% is a real thing in terms of an extended run over a period of time. And trading Paul Sewald is a closer who you can make a new Paul Sewald, and they did, for, younger players.
Who is the new Paul Sewald they made?
Munoz.
You can have both. That's what we're talking about now.
But there is a value if you're running a baseball, even like if you're the Dodgers, it still makes sense to trade your closer and just put someone cheaper in that role and inflate their value, because you can trade that player for someone else who plays a more stable position.
But that was a salary dump move because they found themselves in the playoff hunt. They didn't expect to be there.
It was a win leader move. I reject that.
We literally had players talking about how they had to prove the front office wrong at the deadline.
Again, I'm not. That's a different thing than a salary dump. They traded him for Canzone, who is a younger player.
Didn't they make a pure salary dump with relievers earlier in the season?
The Trevor Gott trade was, in fact, a pure salary dump.
It's just not a commitment to winning baseball.
I mean, I agree that they are cheap. They are undoubtedly cheap, and that being cheap hurts their options. Hearts of the Seattle Kraken dropped a touchdown on the lowly San Jose Sharks.
There we go.
7-1 home win.
It's the only sporting event I didn't go to this weekend.
Before losing nearly as badly to Vancouver, 5-1 on Friday.
Oh, of course.
With Brandon Tanev suffering an injury in that one. Tuesday at Chicago, they start a 4-game road trip with the next 3 across the border in Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Seattle Sounders, in the last of the 3 games you attended this weekend, a 1-0 loss Sunday to LAFC in the MLS Western Conference semifinals, ending their season. This was, I felt, a very strange match, generally speaking.
Can I tell you something?
Okay.
This was literally the first Sounders match I watched all year.
Yeah.
This was it, right? Luca was like, how can I watch this? And I'm like, it has to be on local TV.
No, sir. I mean, I did. I did tune in FS1 because I just assumed that they would put the playoff games on national TV.
Do you have the MLS package?
I do, yes.
Well, T-Mobile, it's free. That's what Chris told me. If you have T-Mobile.
Well, technically, you have my T-Mobile. I don't know if you're aware of this. So.
Oh, there's only like one account per.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I signed up for it.
Well, that's good. That's nice to see that's working. I think it's probably a pretty terrible decision, to be honest. But, I mean, how many people in the city of Seattle do you think even watched this match?
I mean, a decent number on the Discord did.
There we go.
So
I feel like the Discord is probably like also, the most active fans.
The answer is not that many because one of the things about Sounders fans and one of the reasons that MLS made this deal in the first place is most of the fans who care about the Sounders are at the game. Like, there's not a lot of like casual MLS fans. Basically, you're at the game.
Don't you think that's an important thing to try to build?
I think it is, but I think they've tried for a long period of time and it didn't really take.
If I had to give,
because here's the thing about watching soccer on TV is most of the like obviously these games are at night, but if I have the choice between watching the EPL on TV or the MLS on TV, that's a pretty easy call most of the time. Whereas I don't have the option of attending an EPL game, but I cannot attend an MLS game.
I found myself being like, this is fun.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been to a Sounders match. I think I went to one last season, but I don't remember 100%. I actually was like, was this the first Sounders match that I went to post-pandemic? And I know that it wasn't because I remember taking a work phone call at a Sounders match for like a long period of it post-pandemic. So... But the pageantry of it, like leading into the game, amazing. And then at the end, the season's just over. It's kind of wild to be like, there was a 3-week break, right? A multiple week break.
Not a 3-week break.
How long was it? 2 weeks?
It was 2 weeks between.
A 2-week break in the middle of your playoffs. You come back, you lose, and it's just like, all right, see you next year. It is a very straight. It is low on the pageantry and on the fan experience. Like taking a break, a 2-week break in the middle of the playoffs is just a stupid thing. Like the MLS has to figure this out.
There is no solution to it. There's no period of time where you can just play all the playoff games between international breaks. I
have
don't think.
So many notes for soccer in general and for the MLS. Like literally stop the clock. That's it. I'm sorry, but like the reality of soccer is you have to stop the clock. The running
this is
clock.
Be your take.
The running clock makes soccer a bad sport to watch. All that happened, literally, there was more than 45 minutes. When was the goal scored? The 30th minute. How clean. Okay, so there were 60 minutes of game time plus 8 minutes of stoppage time plus 1 in the first half. Right. There were 69 total minutes of fans complaining about time wasting. That was it. It was 30 minutes of soccer, 69 minutes of fans complaining about time wasting. And it's just like, maybe the entire sport shouldn't be built around fucking around and wasting time.
I'm going to pass along your notes to FIFA, a notoriously progressive group
I'm
is sure to incorporate this feedback.
It kind of sucks. Like being there and being angry at the referee, it's like, what is he going to do? Add 40 minutes of stoppage time?
I mean, I think look, if you want to get rid of time wasting, then
how
yes,
about this?
Add 40 minutes of stoppage time.
Every other sport has figured it out. You just stop the clock.
Well, again,
the clock doesn't have to run.
I think soccer's doing fine.
Do you think soccer's doing fine? Overall, as a sport, maybe it's doing fine. But I will say F1 is probably catching up in Europe. And
I don't think that's an issue for soccer.
And also, in the U.S., soccer was like the hot sport, right, for a long time. That fan base has leveled off. Do you think the fandom of soccer overall in the United States is growing?
Probably to small
We're
degrees,
the
but
last soccer generation.
not as dramatically as it once was. I mean, I want to raise an unrelated
I told you I was
complaint.
going to be on one.
You did tell me that.
It was kind of boring. Just being like, I'm so angry, but also the idea of fans that I'm like really ultimately I'm kind of like Ben at the start of the Apple Cup. I'm neutral. You know what I mean? I'm not that invested here, but like
The famous cousin Katie's husband, who went to Washington State, was sitting with us and wore blue to the game. Powder blue.
he's in his bitter phase. He's in his bitter era about kook fandom until the game was close, and then he became the most one of the most lovable people, right? And then midway through that game, I was like, I hate Ben so deeply right now.
I was way to the other side, so I had a buffer zone.
When Ben
of
was
you.
squealing every like touchdown that Wazoo scored, because it's just like you're so upset, and then there's a person who you know who's happy. It's not just the amorphous like kook fans, also the fucking asshole who was next to him. We spent so much time complaining about that guy after too. He said that we didn't know football. He was like, these guys don't know football. I'm sure that Katie in particular, telling any Carcino that they don't know something, that is like the number one trigger for a fucking Carcino.
Oh, yeah.
He said that I don't even know what the context was, because Katie didn't want to argue with him about calls. And it's just like, we don't want to talk to you at all, dude.
We don't know you.
Yeah.
We're not. We're just sticking to our own bit. We're minding our own business here.
Yeah.
Which is also a very Carcino trait.
Have fun. No, the people to the other side, amazing.
Well, but we're friends with them.
I don't need to have an in football game relationship with a Coug fan. Thank
agree.
you. We're good. Anyway.
Wait, I wanted to complain about something.
Okay, wait. Can I come
But
back
it's
to my
about time
complaint
wasting.
after?
Okay. Like people always, there's like this thought that referees were biased for Man U during the Sir Alex Ferguson days, because like there were studies that showed that there was longer extra time in Manchester United home games, or maybe in games in general, than in games for other teams. And it's like, yeah, of course there fucking was, because of the fact that teams that actually got a lead on Man U were trying to time waste like crazy. You're not time wasting against Watford.
Yeah. Well, that's my other point is every single fan in the stadium, not everyone or whatever, but like the perspective of the fans, right, was that LAFC is cheating by time wasting and the Sounders are angels.
Oh, of course.
But like the shit would have been exactly the same had it been the other way around. And that is
not exactly the same, because teams do time waste more when they have the lead at the road. Yes. Like there's a logic to it.
But it's not like LAFC invented the concept of time wasting and just them, right? Yeah. They are not. There is a singular evil to organ and faking injuries. That is an organ thing. They have done it for a long time. Organ fakes injuries.
Not really for a long time. Mostly just since Dan Lanning got there.
You think Dan Lanning specifically? Chip Kelly didn't fake injuries?
No, they had injuries.
They had injuries faked against
them.
So Dan Lanning personally, but that is different. It's not like you play against Wazoo and every player's faking injuries, or UW has players faking injuries.
There was another team that like picked it up in the Pac-12 that was not against us, right? At the end of a half. And they did it too late, though. The clock had already run out.
But so like the faking injuries thing, that is Oregon specifically trying to game the system. Yes. That is them personally cheating. LAFC and the Sounders both understand the concept of time wasting and have done it in equal measures, both positively and negatively, for and against you. It's just a broken sport. Like it is not the fun. It was it's
really a strange turn for Leo Messi to take.
But LAFC scored, and I thought in my head, thank God LAFC scored, because now we're actually going to start playing soccer. I'm like, that is what needs to happen. A sport shouldn't be like, well, I hope one team gets down so the sport can become interesting now. You know what I mean? But like the Sounders attacking during that time period was the only fun aspect. They would have an opportunity. Then LAFC would time waste for a period of time or whatever, and we would go back to booing or something. It's a stupid fucking dance that is done, right? And then you end and you're like, well, I guess I'm mad at the referee. Like I don't. There were some calls, but the other piece was
I think the referee was also the referee.
I'm not saying it was a well-refereed match. Were you watching?
Yeah.
The slide tackle that Chiellini had all legs, right? Like you saw that on the replay. It was not like I was expecting the replay to be like, oh, it was actually clean. And then I saw the replay and I was like, oh yeah, that should have been a foul. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I do, yeah.
It was literally right in front of us. But
the referee, Ted Enkel, was mentioned on the broadcast so many times. Like, that's just never a good sign when there's so much discussion of the referee and a lot of Taylor Twellman disagreed with his calls.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not saying that it was a well-refereed game, but there was a little part of me in the back of my head. I told Chris, he was complaining about, I think Chiellini was on the ground, and I was like, I almost named a child after that person. And I was like, my allegiances here are to the Sounders, but also I'm not like, oh, wow, I feel so deeply about Jordan Morris or whatever. Jordan Morris is just a soccer player, right? Like, Nico Ladero is just a soccer player.
I mean, Jordan Morris is also a local.
No,
like,
that's great. That is
that.
Great. But he is an MLS player, right? He is a very nice MLS player. Giorgio Chiellini is on the best team in all of Europe. He won the fucking Euro with that team. And the Sounders got so thoroughly Chiellini'd in this game that he was just like, he was doing his whole thing, right? And I was like, I wonder if I'll feel anything watching Chiellini. And it's frustrating to be on the other side of it, right? Yeah. To see that and to have your rooting interest be against it. But at the end of the day, like when he's making those plays in the box and he's so physical, right? I can't remember where there was Rui Diaz or whatever. Like they were arguing that he hugged him or whatever. And he just did the Chiellini thing. And I was like, that's a motherfucking football player right there. I was like, all of you people are playing soccer. Giorgio Chiellini is playing football. Thank you. So there was a little part of me that was just like, maybe go get a fucking player like that, Sounders, and then we can talk. This roster is ancient. It is ancient.
But it's not ancient.
It's not?
No.
At the top, these players, they have just been on the team forever, and there hasn't really been like this. They lived through this 14-9 season. This is the Huskies being 12-0 of a season. I'm sorry.
It's not on several levels, but no, I mean, that was the big story of this season. Nico Ladero did not start this match.
I know.
Has not started any of the recent matches.
So you're saying that the roster has evolved with these players kind of phasing out?
Yeah. Real Rui Diaz doesn't start anymore. I mean, he's not.
Is he gone after this year?
He is under contract for next season. We'll talk about it in a second.
But Ladero's gone.
Yes.
Okay.
So for anyone who did not watch this match and did not just want a lecture about the rules of the sport, which is the world's most popular.
Here's what happened in the sport. The goalie's holding the ball. People are counting. Every person's counting different numbers. They're like, it's just like Karl Malone. And I'm like, well, it's not just like Karl Malone, actually, because the clock is ticking off here. When Karl Malone's doing that, it's kind of just annoying. But the clock is ticking off in soccer. There is a difference.
It's only a rule in basketball because of boredom.
Exactly. Our lives are frittering away from us while this goalie is just bouncing the ball or whatever.
Denis Bouanga had the goal for LAFC on the breakaway in the 30th minute. Sounders, who had pretty much controlled play to that point, finished with 16 shots, 8 of them on goal. They had 1.2 expected goals to 0.4 for LAFC. Now, I would caution in a situation like this, like, it's kind of inevitable.
Trying. From the 30th minute on?
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, the Sounders got so unlucky in this one.
They got a little unlucky.
They probably should have scored a goal at some point along the way. But if they had scored a goal...
The ball that Jordan Morris had at the very, very beginning of the match.
Maxime Crepeau was incredible in goal for LAFC. But
he also just wasted so much time. You have to factor that in.
I don't have that in my XG calculations. But had it been tied or had LAFC not scored that Bouanga goal, like they would have created a lot more opportunities than they actually did. So as we look ahead to next season for the Sounders, which is in 4 to 6 weeks, I believe, Ladero announced before the playoffs they would be his last with the Sounders. He's the most prominent free agent, although they have not ruled out a return, with Stephen Fry apparently agreeing to an extension ahead of his free agency. And granted, Fry is rather old, but goalkeeper is a position where you can play for an extended period of time, so that's not a huge issue necessarily or an imminent issue. Your lookalike Kellen Rowe is also a free agent. The Sounders hold club options on Josh Atencio, Joao Paulo, and Albert Rusnak, as well as reserves Javier Arriaga and Aber, who seem unlikely to return. That would free up some substantial cap space along with Lodero, as well as a designated player spot, to build around this core that they have developed this year, with Josh Atencio moving into the starting lineup, Leo Chu as a young player, and then Jackson Reagan at center back. Those are, along with Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan, who are younger, Alex Roldan. That's the core of the Sounders going forward, although Joao Paulo and Albert Rusnak, who are a bit older, have been an important part of the defensive spine in midfield.
Do you think those players are actually like the core of the Sounders? Like, are those MLS Cup winning players, considering where the MLS is going right now?
I mean, we'll see where the MLS is going with a full season of Messi and how that potentially affects things and, what's next after that. But yeah, I mean, they were pretty good this year despite not getting great contributions from their highest paid player. Like,
who was the Ruiz?
No, Lodero.
Lodero
is their second highest paid player. So it was really, I mean, he did not have a great season. He played a lot more than Lodero did.
Lodero was like Bobby Wagner trying to fill a gap.
Just way too low on Bobby Wagner right now.
I told you I was going to be on. You weren't at the game. You did not have to sit through this.
Yeah, but you just need to blame Pete Carroll for this and not Bobby Wagner. Because guess what? We had a season of not Bobby Wagner, and it wasn't like, oh, the defense was amazing last year without Bobby Wagner. You know what happened? They had to go inside Bobby Wagner because the defense was so bad.
Bobby Wagner.
It's an uncomfortable joke. Kitty on the square. So they were in a position to add a big player to this roster. We'll see. They probably will not do it this offseason, would be my guess. Like Lodero, it will probably be a summer edition, transfer window edition. But, whether that's another goal scorer and they move Jordan Morris back to the wing on a more regular basis.
Bobby Wagner's PFF grades are actually very, very good.
Yeah. Or if you think that Jordan Morris is just the striker for this team, then, I think it's signing another depth scorer and then maybe try and invest in another top-tier playmaker along the lines of Lodero, who was the source of this. They signed Lodero and they won the MLS Cup immediately afterwards and went to 4 in a period of time.
It is clear to me that that's what this team needs. They do not have almost any playmaking. Like, the chances that were created was there's the Jordan Morris run. Obviously, LAFC was playing very defensive, and they are playing against, like I said, one of the best defenders in the world.
Correct.
In the middle of the field. So, people complaining about that. Just Chiellini has everybody organized, right? He's a beast in the middle, and he has everybody organized and on schedule. He is at a different level than most players. That's what I was thinking about, where I was like, the creativity of, an MLS player is, they do everything that I expect them to do, right? But a player who's at, a truly, truly high level does things that are just, actually miraculous, right? That are...
And Bouanga had that moment for their goal. He won the Golden Boot. He's the leading scorer in the league. That's the kind of player. And LAFC has more money than the Sounders do. But, I think this is an opportunity for the Sounders to go out and add a marquee talent who can be part of this roster for the next 5 to 6 years.
Bouanga's French.
He's Gabonese, but a French national.
I see.
Yeah.
And played at Saint Etienne.
Yeah.
So, has played at a pretty high level.
Yeah, he played in League One. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's legit. And look, again, LAFC has spent the most. I don't know if they've spent the most money, but they've at least spent the money most effectively of anyone in MLS. And it does seem like we're maybe transitioning away from the period of time where the Sounders and Timbers were, one of them were in MLS Cup every year.
I heard Cincinnati's good somehow.
Cincinnati was good, yes.
I was like, are you sure?
We have double-checked the record.
Chris was like, no matter what, the MLS Cup will be played in Ohio. And I was like...
It's either going to be Cincinnati or Columbus.
I was like, in the United States? Ohio?
I mean...
They're playing a soccer final there.
When we played in MLS Cup most recently in 2020, it was in Columbus.
It's something about it just doesn't check out. But Cincinnati being very good. Maybe they've spent, I don't know.
Probably not as much as Inter Miami.
Or LAFC. But the skill level, the attacking and the playmaking, LAFC had some, before they closed up shop or whatever, between Vela, between Bouanga, there's some real attacking there.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're a great team. But again, the Sounders had a better record than them in the regular season. So it's not like, they're on totally different levels here.
Sometimes that doesn't matter. The Mariners had a chance to... Did they have a chance to eliminate the Rangers from the playoffs?
If they had swept that series?
Well, the Rangers were the wild card in the end, right?
They were the wild card.
And the Mariners won 3 of 4.
No, they weren't. Wait, were they?
I believe they were.
I don't know. I guess that would make sense because I was wondering why they weren't the 2 seed, and then they weren't. So, yeah, they must have been the wild card. All right, let's talk about UW women's basketball, which swept their way through the Rainbow Wahine Showdown in Honolulu, winning all 3 of those games by at least 17 points, the first 2 by precisely 20. Friday against Idaho State, mostly about defense, a 57-37 win as they held the Bengals to 16 field goals and 22 turnovers. On Saturday, the offense got going against former UW coach Chris Gobrecht and Air Force, with Lauren Schwartz's 19 leading 3 players in double figures, and the Huskies holding the Falcons to 32% shooting. And then the defense shined again against host Hawaii on Sunday. The Rainbow Wahine shot 28% from the field. Delia Daniels dominated the forward paint with 19 points and 9 boards, and Savia Sellers came off the bench for 9 points. Huskies back home Saturday afternoon against USF. The Dons are 2-4. Their longtime coach and former Stanford player Molly Goodenbauer. Yale, their only D1 win today, but they were competitive at Arizona State, losing 77-69. Also, as a common opponent, they lost at Hawaii. So, should be an opportunity for the Huskies to run their record to 8-0.
Are there sniffs of being ranked here?
I looked at that. They did not receive any votes last week. We'll see if they do this week. I mean, the schedule has been very easy thus far, but Huskies are winning all these games, and that's a good sign because you could lose them. UW men's basketball.
Husky football.
Returns to action.
You could lose them.
We'll get there. Returns to action Tuesday against UC San Diego, not to be confused with San Diego. This one is in the 4th year of their transition to Division I.
Wait, this is actually a different team?
It is, yes.
There's UC San Diego.
In San
Diego.
USD.
And San Diego State.
Correct, yes.
That's too many San Diegos.
I agree. They won their first 4 games, all against sub-200 teams in Ken Palm, all at home. They lost 70-70 to a bad Idaho team as part of the Seattle U Holiday Tournament before, and I have not updated this, facing the host Red Hawks on Sunday night. So as I look this up and stall for time here, oh no, web server is returning an unknown error. They lost 79-67.
Too many San Diegos.
They lost
3?
They lost
2 I was willing to accept.
79-67 to Seattle U on Sunday night. But we'll stick around in the city a couple extra nights.
If you need me to fill anymore, I can
God, you've got all sorts of material. You'll be here all week.
About what's next? 4 San Diegos? There really is. There are 3 different. I'm just mostly fascinated with this in general. That there are 3 different colleges, not even that are competing in college basketball. That there is a UC. I thought San Diego was UC San Diego.
San Diego State. I don't know. Don't ask me to explain
I'm saying system. San Diego.
No,
not San Diego State.
USD is private. They're Catholic.
Okay.
That's why they play in the West Coast Conference.
That's a Jesuit school or just a Catholic school?
I don't know which particular denomination they are, but
okay.
They are Catholic.
And then San Diego State is
a public school,
but not part of the UC system. Oh, you've really gotten to the bottom of it.
At least they're not named UC. I know that much.
Look, now I feel like there could be more San Diegos.
This is Peltoncast Higher Education. UW men returned to Las Vegas Saturday for what's developed into an important matchup against Colorado State. The Rams are number 29 and Ken Palm with a 6-0 start capped by upsetting Creighton, speaking of Catholic colleges, 69-48 to win the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City. They held an efficient Creighton offense to 34% shooting on 2, 6 of 29 from 3, including a 1 of 16 night from guard Trey Alexander. This is an experienced team that plays 5 seniors and a junior atop its rotation. 6-foot guard Isaiah Stevens is the engine of the offense, ranking in the nation's top 10 in assist rate while shooting 61% on 2s, 53% on 3s. Center Joel Scott is an interesting story. He was the Division II Player of the Year last season at Black Hills State, which is not in San Diego, and has proven effective against better competition.
Wait, where are the Black Hills at?
I want to say it's the Dakotas.
I was going to guess that too. It's somewhere around there.
It's got to be the Dakotas somewhere. The following Tuesday, Huskies back at home against Montana State, their lowest-rated non-conference opponent, according to KenPom. Bobcats are 3-3. They did win 63-60 at Cal, but lost.
Spearfish, South Dakota.
Okay, lost 71. I'm not familiar with Spearfish, South Dakota. Lost 71-68 at Seattle U, and at home to number 324 Green Bay. Montana State, both one of the nation's slowest-paced and least efficient teams. They have yet to reach 70 points this season.
Okay. I feel like you talk so much that I really didn't even... You're just talking very fast there.
Colorado State, it's a big game. They're actually better rated now than Xavier. So this is another team that the Huskies could be battling against.
So this is Saturday in Vegas.
Saturday in Vegas. They've timed this so that the football plays Friday night, men's basketball plays
incredible.
Saturday. You got
Is it just a one-off game? What is the...
Yeah. It's not like a tournament or anything.
And it's been scheduled for a while?
Yes.
Wow. They really knew the script in college football, huh?
They did.
Do you think that was an expect or like
Washington? Don't tell Coug fans.
We had it clinched anyway.
Fair.
Already playing in Vegas. But do you think that was something that when they scheduled this basketball game that they had in mind that it was the day after the Pac-12 championship?
I do think that.
And they were just like, well, there's a chance.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So hopefully there'll be a good turnout there of Husky fans. All right, Huskies football again has the hammer at 12-0. So now that brings us to Thanksgiving night. And we were not thankful for the Seahawks' performance in a 31-13 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, their fourth consecutive loss to their division rivals and the division leaders who extended their lead in the division that they have opened up immediately after the Leonard Williams trade. You were there.
Oh, I was there. Should I rationalize first or should I speak negatively first?
Let's start negative and then go to rationalize.
There were so many 49ers fans in the building. Just this concept that the Seahawks have a quote unquote good fan base. And look, they're not the Chargers or whatever, but like the Seahawks have, it's like, what's something that was powerful, really good for a long time, and now is washed.
No, the first thing that popped into my head.
The United States of America?
Oh, that was not it.
What was that?
Because of your earlier comment.
Michael Penix Jr., Bobby Wagner?
It was Bobby Wagner. Which again is not fair.
The Seahawks are the fall of the late stage capitalism of fan bases. Like, it's just not a good fan base anymore. In reality,
I don't know that this is totally fair.
There was a fight in the crowd among Seahawks fans complaining that people were standing up at the game. It's just like people are mad that other people are cheering for the team when we are surrounded by red everywhere around us. Like, this wasn't us involved. This was other people. Because I'm like, well, if nobody else is doing it, like, I don't want to be the asshole who's standing and getting yelled at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's why the last row of the East End zone, best seats in the stadium. Thank you. Being at the top of the Hawks Nest is not what I want. That seems terrifying. but
it's a much longer fall.
Yeah. But the fan base, like the amount of people who sold their tickets who weren't going, I understand it's Thanksgiving. I get that. People should have relished this as an opportunity to play a team. There's a resignation among Seahawks fans, especially against the 49ers. There's not a fight left in them, right? It was just like going into it, there was no energy. There was no excitement. I thought there would be an atmosphere heading into this game. It's Thanksgiving night. It's the first ever time in Seattle that there's been a Thanksgiving game. And there was no atmosphere whatsoever. Wow. Like, even Blake Snell doing the 12th man flag was just like, okay. They honored the Seahawk legend.
San Francisco fans were upset it wasn't Tim Lincecum.
Look, I would have cheered for Tim Lincecum.
Of course. But he could have united everyone.
We don't want to unite everyone. We want to divide everyone. Thank you. But the Seahawk legend was, I can't remember his name because I literally had never heard of him. It was just like, this is a big atmosphere, y'all. Did you spend all of your time and energy on Steve Aoki? Like,
I mean, they may have been on the throwback uniforms.
I don't know how much the Steve Aoki halftime is like NFL versus the Seahawks themselves.
I think it's mostly NFL.
But like, that was pretty good, right? The Niners fans seemed to like it a lot. because it was mostly Niners fans in that building. Did you hear how loud it was? Like when the Niners scored a touchdown, there was almost as loud of a roar as when the Seahawks were doing things well.
I think it was evident on television, yes, how many Niners fans there were.
Pathetic. Like this is a pathetic fan base at this point. And it's just like the team got too good. They got old, fat, and tired, right? And that's where we're at right now with this team. We thought we had it back for a little bit of this year, but it clearly isn't. And this season, they will probably end up with a worse record than they had last season, despite some improvements in the team overall.
If they didn't end up with a worse record than last season.
There were. I can't even.
I mean, the question is whether me taking the under on 8.5 wins is going to be correct.
I don't think it's going to be. They have 3 wins in there, I think.
Their average projection is like basically 8.5 now.
I don't even know if there were some questionable calls. I've been to so many sporting events since then and paid attention to so many sporting events and complained so much about different things. But like the amount of just wide open receivers that Brock Purdy had was shocking against this defense. And it's just like Kyle Shanahan has figured it out, but it's not just against the Seahawks defense. It's everywhere. Like this 49ers team we just have to admit it. I said this multiple weeks ago. They probably should be the favorites for the Super Bowl across the NFL. Like they are probably the best team in the entire league. Brock Purdy went from, I hate complimenting, look, this is not Matt Stafford level, right? But like, whereas last year, at the beginning of this year, I was highly skeptical about Brock Purdy overall. This year, or this part of the season, since their 3-game losing streak coming back, the amount that he is pushing the ball down the field, that he's not taking the easy reception. And in this game, the Seahawks did a relatively good job of it, all things considered. But like the amount that he's going down the field to these receivers, it is terrifying. When Brock Purdy rolls out of the pocket, I should not be as scared as I am. And like, I think they've found a guy, you know?
Yeah.
I think that Kyle Shanahan has found their quarterback. They're not paying him yet. There's a big difference in what a roster looks like when you're paying that quarterback, but they still have a couple of seasons before that has to happen. And right now, the Niners are legitimately terrifying. And there wasn't, even when it could hypothetically be close in the game, it was never actually close. Does that make sense?
I think that's probably true.
Also, or can I pivot to positivity here?
Do we want to talk like the big picture negativity though?
Sure. Well, the Leonard Williams trade. Like literally as I was watching the game, it's annoying that I'm thinking about this, but I'm thinking about the Leonard Williams trade during the game.
I was definitely thinking about the Leonard Williams trade.
Brock Purdy is shredding this defense, and like Leonard Williams was not helpful out there in any aspect.
I think he had some moments. The problem isn't Leonard Williams.
They scored 31 points. There would have needed to be a lot more Leonard Williams out there to have made this a close game.
You were I know this is part of your pivot to positivity, but the defense was not the problem in this game. The defense
still scored 31 points. Like the defense wasn't. Well, look, there's a rationalization to be had about the defense, and that is the Niners are fucking crushing everybody.
Well, this is part of my big picture, though. Is like every year the Seahawks look at the season and they're like, this is the position group that was the problem and we need to fix it. And this year they decided
that's true, though.
Both greedy linebacker because they brought back Bobby Wagner.
They also paid like weirdly a lot of money to Devin Bush when you look at his contract.
I don't think they expected Jordan Brooks to be as healthy as he has been. That was the big issue there. But it was mostly defensive line. And that was the Leonard Williams trade was the culmination of remaking their defensive line with going out and paying a lot to Draymond Jones and things like that. And like, number one, they fixed all the things on defense. They've got a lot of really good players, clearly. You know, Rick Woolen, his coverage numbers are terrific. He wasn't able to play in much of this game because of tackling issues. Yeah, his shoulder was an issue tackling. Is what
I see. Okay. Because I saw a tweet that was like, there's no injury designation for Rick Woolen, and all of a sudden Mike Jackson's just out there.
Yeah.
But I will say the team played pretty well with Mike Jackson out there. All things considered, like Mike Jackson wasn't the problem.
No, definitely not. But like, Rick Woolen is good. Clearly, Devin Witherspoon is awesome. Jamal Adams has actually played really well this season. Quandre Diggs is good. Bobby Wagner has a great PFF rating. They've added all these talented players to the defensive line, and they're still an average defense at best. And again, I keep coming back to it. There's there's one common denominator here, and that's Pete Carroll's involvement in the defense. And I just don't know that I ever believe that they can be anything better than an average defense, no matter what they do, as long as Pete Carroll is involved.
I do not buy that overall, that they can't. Like, if they are talented enough, they can be a top 5 defense. I do not believe that the scheme is so broken.
But, like, how talented do they have to get?
There are a lot of things that they're missing. I'm sorry, but, like, on the opposite side, I think Boye Mafe has been awesome, but they don't have an elite pass rusher.
Correct.
Like,
but their sack rate is actually quite good, all things considered.
They're still starting a second-year corner and a rookie corner. Like, there are things. The linebackers are pretty aged. Like, it's not a perfect defense.
I'm not saying it's a perfect defense. I'm saying that the sum of the parts is less than the parts are individually.
They are probably slightly underachieving right now defensively. But I don't know if that's... And maybe the scheme... You just talked about this with Bob Bender, and I was thinking about that, where it's like, maybe Pete's scheme needs the players to be so good that unless you have elite level talent, it just doesn't quite work. And I think that might have been what we've seen. But like, they are still...
But also that scheme was a long time ago.
Of a rebuild. We are still ahead of schedule on a rebuild.
Well, that brings us to the second point here, which is the position group where they need to upgrade this year is abundantly clear by this point.
But I want to do my positivity first. Or we're still on the negativity?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's abundantly clear that position is quarterback. And I don't think Geno Smith is the problem necessarily for the Seahawks. But again, if you're looking at it, I think there are 2 big picture takeaways from a talent standpoint. It's just not getting enough out of your talent on defense, and the fact that quarterback is the single most important position in the NFL, and Geno Smith is about an average starting quarterback, and they're an average team by every metric.
How much do you think Geno Smith's injury affected him in this game?
I mean, that's impossible for me to say, but this is not a take that developed after this game. This is a take that, has been marinating for a long period of time. And that doesn't mean that Drew Lock is the answer either, by the way, to be clear.
God.
It just means you can't find the next Russell Wilson if you're not looking for Russell Wilson by drafting someone in the 3rd round.
I think Geno was definitely affected by the injury. I think Geno is affected by the pressure. I think that some of the deep balls that he was throwing to DK, well, there was one that was close early on.
Yep.
That it was like, 1 foot. He gets it down. That's a catch. He was missing some of those throws by more than I feel like he's missed them in the past. I think Geno, whether it's the injury that hurt or not, or just how hard he got hit last week and got injured, and maybe it made him a little bit jumpy or whatever. But also he's holding on to the ball longer.
Right.
I don't know. He just didn't look good.
Again, he's not the problem, and I think Abe Lucas's return, which looks like it could be this week, he's practicing, will help. But that's just, if you're looking at, hey, what's the place they have to get better, where they should invest their resources, the answer is clearly quarterback.
That's pretty much every single team across the NFL.
But other teams have glaring needs at other positions too, and that's what I'm saying is because of the bounty of the Russell Wilson trade, there aren't glaring holes to fill elsewhere.
Let me ask you a question. What is the Seahawks record right now? Or whatever record, I don't know. What is the Seahawks DVOA right now if Kirk Cousins is their quarterback?
I think it's better. Because I think Kirk Cousins is a notch better, a tier better than Geno Smith.
Could they be... Kevin O'Connell is a tier better than Shane Waldron, Pete Carroll combo.
I don't know. The tape people love Shane Waldron's offense.
Kevin O'Connell is definitely putting quarterbacks in a good position.
The tape people have also been high on Geno's performance this year. It also needs to be noted. So,
but the sacks, like the 3rd downs, can't just be on the scheme.
I agree, and at some point, as much as I believe that third downs are more random than other downs, they're not more random than other downs. They have more importance than other downs. Therefore, their randomness is magnified. And there are, by definition, fewer of them because you can never play a 3rd down without a 1st down and a 2nd down. At some point, them consistently being so bad at 3rd downs probably has to have some signal to it.
It's probably partially on everybody. It's probably partially on Shane Waldron and also on Geno. Like, and the offensive line, I suppose, but like that should still be showing up elsewhere.
I guess just my main takeaway here is I will be disappointed if the Seahawks don't use they don't have a second round pick. So it would either have to be a third round pick or their first round pick,
I think. But like
I would be disappointed if they do not draft a quarterback in the first 2 days.
We'll see how the rest of the season goes. I do not see them going into next year with Geno Smith as the starting quarterback unless his contract is massively restructured.
Yeah.
And like what Geno was getting paid last year versus what Geno will be getting paid next year is a pretty huge difference. And he's probably performing closer to what he was getting paid last year. As far as
he's still outperforming that. I mean, he's still playing, I think, to a level of an average NFL starting quarterback. There's a lot of teams that would be better off. If you're running that same exercise, then,
But then if everything else in the team is so good, right? And you have an average NFL, you would say if you have no holes anywhere else and you have an average NFL quarterback, that would still be a better team than this team is.
Well, they are an above average offense by DVOA. They have consistently been above average offense. So
I just don't know if that's actually true. And I also think you're probably overrating. And that's what I was saying to you about the Niners, is the Niners are better at quarterback. They're better at running back. They're better at receiver. They're better at tight end. They're better at offensive line. Like across the board, the Niners just they're better at defensive line. They're better at linebacker. They're better in the secondary.
I don't think they can be better at all those things. I don't buy that. I think that's a little bit of a halo effect.
Or the Niners have superstar talent at basically every single one of those positions, and they keep adding, right? The Seahawks traded a second-round pick for Leonard Williams. Like, objectively, whatever you want to say about running backs, right? Christian McCaffrey is different than other running backs. You have to accept at
Christian
least
McCaffrey
partially.
Does seem likely to matter.
The Niners, when they traded picks, I think it amounted to all things. They didn't trade a first-round pick for Christian McCaffrey. He was also under contract for longer. Like, that trade, apples to apples, the Christian McCaffrey trade or the Leonard Williams trade, they're not even in the same fucking conversation as each other. In the same way that the Chase Young trade and the Leonard Williams trade are not in the same conversation as each other. Like, the Niners just keep adding players, and they were bad for a period of time. The Seahawks haven't been bad. They didn't get a Nick Bosa because they were bad.
They did get a top 5 pick.
I guess that's true. But Devin Witherspoon is not. Nick Bosa's in his prime. And that's what I'm telling you about this defense is. It's not necessarily about the defense this year.
I don't know how much better Devin Witherspoon. I mean, I don't want to do the Rick Woolen already surpassed his ceiling thing, but Rick Woolen has probably had a better coverage season this year, and he's been less valuable because he hasn't gotten any interceptions. Like, it is true that you can get better at repeatable skills, but your value can go down because the non-repeatable stuff will become less common. Like, how much better can Devin Witherspoon, how more valuable can Devin Witherspoon get? He can get better, but how much more valuable can he get?
I guess we'll see. I think Devin Witherspoon could be the best defensive player in the league. Like, it would... That's not out of the question. And if he is the best defensive player in the league, he's more valuable than he is right now.
Yeah. But it's not like he's going to go from, it's not like we're talking about... I'm trying to think. Richard Sherman is a rookie to Richard Sherman in year 3 because he's already really fucking good.
Yeah. But if he's Richard Sherman in year 3, you probably have a pretty good defense. And I think there is still room for growth for this defense. I think they will get better throughout the season. And to me, when I look at that...
I just don't... Why?
Because
they've already had the whole season.
Defense.
They haven't gotten better over the course of the season. Why are they going to start getting better today?
You don't think they've gotten better? So that's my.
I think they got better after the first couple of weeks when Witherspoon was out and not being used. Not being used in the slot.
When I look at this game overall, yards per play, it's not like the Niners were fucking around at the end of the game, right? Like they weren't exactly. They were trying to. They scored a long touchdown on basically their last possession, right?
I do think they took their foot off the pedal a little bit.
The Seahawks held them to their third lowest, I think tied for maybe even second lowest yards per play on the season, this defense. And the defense In the end, they gave up 31 points. They made enough stops that if the offense had any semblance of competence or moving the ball, I think this game could have been close.
Sure.
The defense put them in a good enough position. Honestly, when you and I were talking about it last week, I was thinking about that during the game, about like eliminating the big plays. They as much as they could, they took away some of that stuff. They gave up the underneath things. Christian McCaffrey ran for a lot of yards. The scheme was generally right going into this game. And they forced, how many punts did they force? Like, they forced enough punts that I think that if the offense was doing anything at all, they kept also being put in very, very bad positions by the defense.
Yeah, by the offense, you mean.
Or by the offense. The offense failed them in this game. And that's what I'm saying is, I think the defense already has gotten better. And this was a sign, this was a game that the offense got, or the defense got better. We just didn't see that because of how horrible of a position the offense put them in.
I will say that argument looks slightly, but marginally better because we watched the Rams just crush the Cardinals.
I'm
Sunday.
sick of doing that, though, of just like every game being like, well, secretly, like that's what we do for UW every week. Well, it's like, well, actually, when you look at Wazoo schedule-wise, and if you ignore the whatever, like if you ignore the game that they got throttled by UCLA or something, like sometimes you have to, to be a good team, sometimes you have to win a game. And also to be a good team, sometimes you have to crush a team.
I agree with all that. I'm just saying the Rams offense seemed really bad in their success against the Seahawks. It seems exclusive to the Seahawks.
Though, where it is always like against the Seahawks.
You're the one who wants the Seahawks to be improving. I'm making your case for you.
No, I'm complaining. I'm complaining about timing. Every time the Seahawks play the Rams, Matt Stafford just got back. Andrew Whitworth just got back. They've never played the Rams. I guess they have.
They played them twice last year, friend.
They also played, I believe, a playoff game where Jared Goff came off the bench. But But the Niners had how many punts? Here we go. From the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punts plus a pick six. Like, that isn't, when you are playing the Niners, if you force 5 punts and a pick six, that should be a good enough game to have you be competitive if your offense is competent at all.
I agree.
And the offense just did not put them in any good positions.
Was there anything else in the pivot to positivity? Well, let's return to the negative.
JSN, though. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah, that was nice. The negativity that is the upcoming schedule, because it doesn't get a whole lot easier next Thursday. This Thursday is the Seahawks.
I guess one more thing on the pivot to positivity first. They ran the ball very well. Christian McCaffrey's numbers were much stronger than they were overall for the season, but I actually think they schemed this game well, per what we talked about last week. Brock Purdy's numbers, like some of the weeks that he had previous, they were like, these cannot be real numbers. And Brock Purdy with a 62 QBR, 209 yards passing, a touchdown, a pick six. Like, if you just saw Brock Purdy in this game and you didn't have the background, he was still scarier than those numbers, and the plays that he did make were more terrifying. But you would look at it and be like, he's a fine quarterback.
Yeah.
But if you looked at the performances against Jacksonville and who do they play in between?
I forget who their other game.
Tampa Bay. Yeah, Tampa Bay, 4 incompletions and over 120 more yards. Like an 84, and then Jacksonville was 7 incompletions, basically 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, he was better in those performances. And through 365 against the Bengals. Like, this was it was a fine performance from Brock Purdy.
Yeah. So the Seahawks headed to Dallas on Thursday to take on the Cowboys wearing their retro 90s jerseys. I don't know why I'm calling them 90s jerseys. They did that, but they're 70s/80s/90s jerseys for the second time.
I can tell you why they're doing the 90s. Do you know who it's for?
Yes.
It's for us.
I agree.
It is for you and me.
Maybe not us specifically, but yes.
No, it's for us personally.
It's a Seahawks coordinator reunion. I had forgotten until I looked it up that Brian Schottenheimer is Dallas's offensive coordinator, with Dan Quinn thriving as their defensive coordinator. The Cowboys started 2-0, beating the New York teams by a combined 70-10 scores, then lost 2 out of 3 at Arizona and 42-10 at San Francisco, sandwiched around yet another blowout of the Patriots. Since then have continued blowing out bad teams with just 1 loss after being 3-2, that coming 28-23 at Philadelphia. Their plus 162 point differential is the best in the NFL, but with the Eagles winning in OT, they're still going to need some help to win the NFC East and avoid having to go on the road to start the playoffs, as they did last year when they beat Tampa Bay in the wild card round before losing 19-12 at the 49ers in the divisional round. After dealing with an injury at the start of the season and interception luck when he threw a league-high 15 in just 12 games last year, Dak Prescott back to being one of the NFL's best quarterbacks. His 70% completion percentage leads the league. His 7.9 yards per attempt are most since 2020. And after that aberrant season, his interception rate is right back to where it was before last season with 6 in 11 games. Dak is number 2 behind Brock Purdy in EPA plus CPOE composite and threw for a season 472 yards and 4 touchdowns in the Thanksgiving blowout of the Commanders, getting their defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach both fired after that game. His favorite target, CeeDee Lamb, hit 1,000 yards last week. He's averaging nearly 100 yards per game, ranking 5th in the NFL, catching a career-high 75% of his targets for a career-high 10.3 yards each. They have 4 other receivers behind 46 and 58 targets, led by tight end Jake Ferguson, whose 10.5 yards per reception aren't as good as their receivers. Newcomer Brandon Cooks has been pretty good, averaging 13.7 yards per reception with a 69% catch rate. Michael Gallup has been the least effective of their receiver trio, catching just 61% of his targets. Tony Pollard hasn't enjoyed the same success as their leading rusher as he did splitting time with Ezekiel Elliott. He's averaging just 4.2 yards per carry after 5+ each of the last 2 seasons. But as a team, the Cowboys have improved from 12th in EPA per rush to 9th. Their defense ranks 4th in EPA per play on both dropbacks and rushes. Michael Parsons at the center of that. He's number 1 in pass rush win rate among edges. His 11.5 sacks rank in the NFL's top 5, and just 2 away from his career high of 13.5 after making All-Pro first team each of his first 2 seasons. As a team, the Cowboys are tops in pass rush win rate, despite no other players in the top 20 at either edge or interior, and they're 3rd in sack rate. Speaking of playing better than ceiling, second-year corner Deron Bland having a charmed season in place of injured Trevon Diggs opposite Stephon Gilmore. The former 5th-round pick leads the NFL with 7 interceptions and has returned 5 of them for touchdowns. The Cowboys' interception rate as a team tops the league. They're allowing opponents to complete just 60% of their passes, which is 5th lowest for 6.4 yards per attempt. There is a wide split in the Cowboys' opponent yards per attempt in their wins and losses. They haven't allowed more than 7 in any of their wins, and they're at 9+ in all 3 losses. Also, big rushing totals for teams in those games, though only the Cardinals were particularly efficient on the ground, averaging 7.4 yards per carry.
Yeah, and I think they're not the Niners. The game's on the road, I get that. But like when you look at the Cowboys' schedule and who they've played and who they've beaten, I mean, this is basically all of the worst teams in the NFL.
I mean, that's why by DVOA they are behind San Francisco. They came into last week 6th. They have not yet updated.
They're definitely not
this weekend's games.
A bad team, obviously. But when they've played against good teams, I mean, you know, the 42-10 thrashing in San Francisco is like, that one is pretty glaring. The Seahawks are basically the first team, I guess, at the Chargers. But the Seahawks are basically the first team that they've played that's average. Right?
I mean, the Chargers are very average, yes.
So
in a similar ballpark.
Those are kind of the 2 games. They've either played the worst teams in the league, or they have played the Niners and the Eagles. But like, as far as teams in the middle of the road, and that's partially why they have big losses and big wins. And I do feel like this is the kind of game that I think the Seahawks are going to be more competitive in this game than what we saw against San Francisco and against Baltimore. Like, I don't think this Cowboys team.
So.
Those
were 2 of the 3 worst losses of the Pete Carroll era by point differential.
I don't think this team is at the level of those 2 teams, and then also the defense, despite statistically being good, is not quite. They're not the Ravens, right? Like the Ravens, I think have regressed a tiny bit lately, but like the
defensively,
maybe overall as a team.
Not tonight. They didn't defensively. I don't know if you saw. You were at a game during that one, but they forced 4 turnovers against the Chargers and allowed 10 points.
Nice. But their defense is not as good as the Baltimore defense is. And whether it's turnover forcing or not, like there is some luck at bay there. So We'll see. I do think the Seahawks missed Ken Walker a tiny bit in that game last week. Having Abe Lucas back will be extraordinarily helpful if he is back on the right side of the line. We'll see how much that's actually a factor. But I could see the Seahawks being in this game.
I think so too. I mean, winning the game is still unlikely. Percentage chances there?
25%.
All right, I'm going to say the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't like that they're playing on another Thursday.
It's very odd. It's like they've scheduled the last week as if it's a usual Sunday to Sunday schedule.
I mean, for both teams, right? They're both playing Thursday to Thursday. I didn't know this game was on Thursday until today. I thought it was on Sunday.
Oh, you just learned that?
Yeah, not during this. Earlier, I was listening to the Ravens and the Chargers on the radio, and they're like, coming up, Seahawks, Cowboys. And I was like, really? It would have been very nice to have had that extra time period of rest, which they will have after this game. But
they're going to need for that one too.
I mean, I understand. But I think this team desperately needs the mini bye, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that they're not getting in this game. And I think it would have been extraordinarily helpful for them as the team to just have a second to get healthy, reset for a minute after this long stretch. But I think the Seahawks are not as bad as they looked on Thursday.
What if the Seahawks consider just taking a bye week against the Niners? Just forfeit that game in San Francisco. Move on to Philadelphia. We're on to Philadelphia.
You know, it's not the worst idea I've ever heard. But I think they are in desperate need of that. I think Geno is in desperate need just to get healthy and have a little reset. I do think, like I said, I think this defense over the last handful of weeks of the season, that's why when you say the over-under, right, the winnable games that they have left are the Cardinals, the Steelers, and the Titans. Those are the games that maybe they won't be favored in, but it'll be 1-2 point games or whatever. Yes. They'll either be favored, and then the rest is just the gauntlet. That's it, right? There's nobody else?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
The gauntlet?
I mean, just in general, they're in a position that they probably will need to go 3-0 with 2 of those games on the road.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that they pick off one of these games.
I mean, look, if probably, I guess home versus Philadelphia was the single most likely one to pick.
I think that might be the one.
Yeah. But if you're in the 20% ballpark for all of these games, the odds are you will win one of them most of the time. So
I think that Eagles one, but don't rule out this Cowboys game, is what I'm saying. I think we will find ourselves in the fourth quarter being like, like the Seahawks are up 4 or something, and we're like, I feel like this is the kind of game where you don't want to think in your head, where you're like, the Seahawks are actually going to win this game. And then you'll think it, and then they'll score a touchdown. The Cowboys will score a touchdown. But, that's the territory that I think this game is.
That's a reasonable thought. Well, let's get to UW football, which is 12-0 for the second time in school history, has matched the school record, 4 wins in a season. Obviously, they only played 12 games in 1991 when they won the national championship. Did not have a Pac-12 championship, the 12th regular season game back then. And there's really 2 ways to view this after the Huskies needed a last-second field goal, a 4th-and-1 conversion from their own, I believe it was a 29 on the final drive inside the final minute. Kudos to Kalen DeBoer for...
Oh, the balls on Kalen DeBoer.
That was a situation where even I, as much as I believe in the analytics, as much as I believe in aggressiveness, I wasn't ready to be that aggressive.
I'm telling you straight up, they punt that ball, the game is over.
I don't know if the game is over.
The Wazoo is scoring. They are getting a field. Maybe they miss it. Maybe they missed a field goal. But with the timeouts that they had and with the way their offense had been moving, if the Huskies punt that ball in this situation, I think that game is over.
I think, yes, from that standpoint, it probably was the right decision.
And there's a reality that...
It's weird that I had so little faith in the number 5 team in offensive efficiency that includes the 3rd highest favorite for Heisman to pick up 1 yard in that situation against a 5-6 team, which is kind of, I think, telling about where we are with UW football at the moment.
I'm going to tell you what I told you immediately after that play. Rome fucking Odunze. Say his name. That man is the reason that this team is 12-0 right now. I was working on a theory during the game that Michael Penix is maybe just good. Rome Odunze is the greatest offensive player in the history of the University of Washington. There wasn't an offense on Saturday against Wazoo. There was Rome Odunze. And when they put the ball into his hands in that situation, that's when everything went right. Literally, we can talk about Oregon if we want to. It doesn't matter. All that we need to talk about is, are they going to the door to shut? Because I yelled Rome fucking Odunze. But maybe I said his name a little bit too loud. But literally all that is going to happen in that game, if the Huskies are going to win, is they are getting the ball to Rome Odunze. If they're working the ball to Rome Odunze and then playing off of that, that is an offense that is a winning offense against Oregon. If they are not, then they are not going to do anything. And that's what they didn't do enough of against Wazoo in this game. Put the ball up to him. The man comes down with the football. The catch radius is infinity around Rome Odunze. Penalties, receptions, touchdowns, rushes. Rome Odunze is it. Again, he is the most important offensive player in the history of the University of Washington.
Odunze had 12 targets on Saturday, which...
How many catches?
7.
7 catches? That's all?
His 12 targets combined for 120 yards. There were 20 other targets in this game, 21 other passes, one of them untargeted. They went for a total of 84 yards.
Plus at least one pass interference in there.
Now, I don't think that what you're saying is quite true, because over the course of the season, Jalen Polk's targets have been nearly as valuable as Rome Odunze's targets. But whatever's going on with Jalen Polk, since he taunted the rain leading up to that Oregon State game, it has not gone well. His 4 targets resulted in no catches on Saturday, and a play where you just kind of got outfought for the ball for Michael Penix Jr.'s interception in this one.
And a straight drop on the last series.
Yeah.
Jalen Polk makes me a little nervous. I think the Huskies tried very hard to get Jalen McMillan involved in this game.
I think they saw something they wanted to exploit in terms of the Cougars defending east and west rather than north and south.
They were pretty wrong about that.
He had 5 catches for 26 yards on 7 targets. You know how many yards after the catch he had?
How many?
40.
Really?
Yeah. His catches have combined for minus 14 yards.
But even the east-west stuff to Odunze was better also. He's a beast right now.
Yeah.
He is a beast. And again, in this game, did you feel Apple Cup, we could put it aside or whatever, but did you feel any joy when that field goal went through, Grady Gross?
Yeah, I felt joy when that field goal went through. It wasn't strictly relief.
I felt only relief.
Okay.
Literally, I felt no joy at all. It was just nice win. On to the next one.
Jan asked me whether it was a fun day on Saturday. I was like, well, the end of it was fun.
Yeah, literally at no point. I wouldn't say that I had fun. There were a couple, the moments, the pick that they had when the Huskies were up 7, got the pick, and you're like, finally.
Yes.
Finally, the crowd was rocking. We were ready to go. It was like the Huskies are actually going to pull away. But then they didn't do it. And I have no idea what's going on with Michael Penix right now. That man was not Michael Penix, who we saw. Some of those throws that he missed were just shocking to see Michael Penix miss by that much. I don't think, aside from maybe the first touchdown pass, I guess the only touchdown pass, right?
No, he threw 2 to do it, didn't say.
Okay. There's the one in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good ball too, I think.
Yeah.
I think he threw 2 good balls the entire game. And they were both touchdown passes to Rome Odunze.
I mean, there was probably more than that.
But
and there were some plays on which his receivers did not help him. But this is something that Christian Cable mentioned on Montlake in his day after piece. Even the completion to Jack Westover.
No, he missed.
That goes for at least 5 more yards.
Throws. He missed 2 throws to Westover that he had to go and make big completions. Michael Penix, he didn't really look right post game. He didn't really look right during the game. There's a little bit of I don't know if it was the yips or something, but
I don't think it's that.
Those were balls. I will tell you, I watched every single play of Oregon State the day before. Bo Nix is basically perfect. Seeing some of the throws that Bo Nix makes.
We'll get to it.
If you could make Cameron Ward and give him pocket awareness like that, some of the balls that he had where he was leading receivers, he had much better touch than Michael Penix had in this game. It was unlike almost anything that we've seen from Penix, and we are now at. I mean, when was the last time that you would say that?
I'll go through the stats. So if we go through the Oregon game,
okay,
Penix in his first 6 games, and I think part of it is he set this standard probably unrealistically high, was completing 72% of his passes for 10.7 yards per attempt, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, had to approximate the QBR off the game logs, but about a 92 QBR in that span.
Okay.
Over the last 6 games, the second half of the season, 59% completions.
That's shocking.
7.5 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His QBR is about 69. So, like, if you look at, for comparison's sake, last season, which is similar to his full season now this year, he completed 65% of his passes for 8.4 yards per attempt, 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 82 QBR. So, like, it may just have been a charmed few weeks that was never sustainable. Like, I talked about the Michigan State game. Like, every time he threw a deep ball, it was completed. And, like, that's not the way football is supposed to work.
But they're not even completing short passes. I feel like the offense has changed. There's something about the offense that against Wazoo, like, they were running a different offense than this UW offense generally has been. There was nothing really across the middle of the field.
That's been an issue for a period of time now. It was certainly an issue against Utah as well.
The intermediate stuff just isn't really happening. It's not that it's not working. It's just not happening. And for some reason, they have really moved away from last year. Like, when I think about the UW offense, there were big plays, but it is those, like, intermediate routes that they really, really were dominant on, right? And now the offense looks totally different. And hopefully maybe Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, Rome Odunze back. Like,
also, Giles Jackson, who sat this game out to preserve his red shirt, he's able to play going forward without affecting his red shirt status. So it'll be the first time this all season the Huskies have had their full complement of receivers. They did go into the Oregon game that way, but then Jalen McMillan got hurt on the first series.
Yeah, and basically didn't play. And also, Dylan Johnson, like, we have a little bit better sense. He played well in that Oregon game. That was the first game I think Dylan Johnson played well.
Correct.
All season was that game. We have a little bit more activated Dylan Johnson in this game offensively. But, like, it comes down to 2 things against Oregon. It is, does Michael Penix look normal? And which is maybe normal is a combination of everything, right? But it's not that Wazoo game, right? That is not Michael Penix Jr. Does he look like a composite of the entire season? Maybe he's not as good as he was at the beginning of the year. Maybe he's not as bad as he was at the end of the year. But, like, can we get an average Michael Penix Jr., right?
Yeah.
Where he was last year. How much are they getting the ball to Rome Odunze? And how much, if they are getting the ball to Rome Odunze, is Oregon defending that and it's opening things up for other players, right? Because if they are spending so much time paying attention to Rome Odunze, that means that things are going to open up for both of the Jalens, for Jack Westover, for Giles Jackson going east-west. Like, there's so much more that you can do off of that. And I do have to give UW credit because in the end, them running Dylan Johnson in the line, like, those third down plays, it's just like, what are you doing? Why last week did you beat Oregon by passing to Rome Odunze, but they couldn't get a third down play to Rome Odunze? It's just pounding Dylan Johnson in the line over and over and over again. They finally played off of that. And Wazoo was expecting on that fourth down play. They were expecting Dylan Johnson to run. And that meant that Rome Odunze was wide open.
I mean,
right?
Penix said after the game that on the sidelines, Ryan Grubb was repeatedly telling him, look, we've got that play. We're waiting for the right moment.
Yes.
And that was it.
It's one of those things where they did it over and over and over again that Wazoo was expecting it. To me, I really felt like they were trying to beat Wazoo without showing too much of the playbook. And I think they had to show more of the playbook than they wanted to in the end. But I do think there's maybe another level against Oregon of this playbook that they have not rolled out yet, that they're like in the back of their minds, they are like, this is the Oregon playbook that they've had tucked away.
No, the other element of that from a health standpoint, Tuli Lasanoa played only on the final drive for Washington State, or their final drive in this game, after playing a bit more in previous games. So it seems likely that was trying to keep him healthy for the Oregon game.
Okay.
And the Giles Jackson decision is another example of that. Like, it wasn't either or in that case, but, like, clearly they were making some calculations based on the likelihood of beating Washington State. I will say on the offense, they've struggled so much in the second half that they've dipped to 5th in FPI efficiency. Like, this was my point going back to the USC game. Pay more attention to where things are overall and less than to the direction that they're going, and you're going to make better predictions. But I also just want to kind of talk about the Huskies being 12-0 and, you know, their last 3 wins by a combined 12 points, and just kind of the bigger picture, because I think there's 2 contrasting ways to look at this. Number one, the optimistic view. I'm going to start with the optimistic view and pivot to pessimism this time. Is like, they became the first team to run the table in the Pac-12 regular season since it was the Pac-12.
The only team. They are the only team in the Pac-12 to have ever had an undefeated regular season.
How many years was it Oregon loses at Arizona State, UW loses at Arizona State? Like, some bullshit loss to a bad team that just undermines your chances of playing in the college football playoff.
It was all of them.
And the Huskies did, well, no, not all of them, because the Huskies did make the playoff.
I mean, it wasn't like a bullshit loss. They had a legit loss.
Correct.
But like,
so for the Huskies to have avoided that is an incredible accomplishment that is so much worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
The other perspective I have is, we talked about it with the Seahawks last week. Like, they'd played close with a lot of mediocre teams, and they didn't win all of those like the Huskies did. But then they faced the real team against the Niners, and we saw the difference. That's my fear for Friday.
It's a fair fear to have. The difference is, this team is way the fuck better than the Seahawks are.
I agree
Don't
with
you
that.
dare compare them to the Seahawks. You can compare Oregon and the 49ers. In my head, they are the same thing. Every single person who is a 49er, there was actually a Seahawks fan after the game. He was drunk. He was like, I have to tell you something about me. And he opened up his shirt, and it was a Ducks shirt underneath. And he was like, and I was like, you didn't have to tell us that.
Nope.
He was a Seahawks fan. It was like, we were fine as we were. In my head, every Niners fan is a Ducks fan, and vice versa. Like, they are singularly aligned evil.
Shouts to LaMichael James.
Their offenses run really similarly too.
Shouts to Eric Armstead.
That's why it's annoying, right? Like, they find, if anytime you're like, I think we're getting off the field here, it's 3rd and 8, there's a running back wide open for 10 yards. Bo Nix is the best quarterback. I think Bo Nix is better than Caleb Williams right now on the field.
It's not even close.
NFL potential might be different, but like, Bo Nix is the best quarterback that they have played and that they will play in this season. He's probably the best quarterback across college football.
In QBR, he is number 2 behind Jaden Daniels.
There is a chance that we play Jaden Daniels. Probably an extraordinarily low one, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know what the odds. Yeah, I mean, I guess they would play in the Sugar Bowl. I don't know if that's one of the playoff semifinals.
No, if the Huskies lost and LSU won and played them in a
playoff game?
Yeah, not in a playoff game.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Huskies apparently are, if they don't go to the playoff, are headed to the Fiesta Bowl, and LSU probably wouldn't play there.
That's locked and set in stone.
That's the idea.
Where have you heard this?
The internet. I don't know.
People are just like, that's it? They're going to the Fiesta Bowl?
I mean, it's the only other one out west besides the Rose Bowl. So
they would basically keep the Huskies west.
That's the presumption.
Is the general thinking. Do you think there's any chance that the Huskies make the playoffs and lose? The playoff and lose?
Lose and make the playoff?
Yeah.
You're saying? I don't think there is now. I think the scenarios that made that possible involved Michigan and Ohio State being a blowout.
So you think even if it's a close game, Ohio State gets the nod instead of UW?
Well, that's to presume that there aren't 3 undefeated teams.
If
and then
Florida
Oregon
State loses.
Yeah.
This is all under the scenario that Florida State loses and UW loses.
I mean, I still think Texas would probably get the nod over them in that scenario. I mean, I guess Texas could lose.
To me, it's like, I think there's a slim but possible chance that the committee, if Florida State loses and it's a close game between UW and Oregon and UW loses, I think there's a small chance that the committee is just like, fuck it, let's put in both the Pac-12 teams.
It would be unprecedented. There has never been a three meetings in the same season between the two teams, which obviously wouldn't be guaranteed.
Yeah,
They'd put them in
one would be
opposite
3 and one would be
semifinals.
4. So they wouldn't face each other, at least in the first round. But
ESPN's model has a 1.2% chance.
If that happens.
The Huskies, well, no, like they make the playoff 26% of the time. They beat Oregon 25%. So 1.2% of all scenarios they lose to Oregon and still make the playoff.
I think the way that they played, if they'd been dominant in these games, I think they could lose to Oregon. If they'd played the way that Oregon played, I think that they could have made it in. But I do think there's also a piece of like everybody else who's in the mix has a much easier conference championship game. Every other team, I guess Georgia and Alabama is maybe a questionable one, but like this is.
I would not describe Alabama as an easier opponent than UW.
But
or than Oregon.
This isn't that Michigan and Ohio State have to play each other again. You know what I mean? And like UW and Oregon, the Pac-12 has set this up that they wanted the two best teams to give themselves the best shot at a playoff team. And the committee could be that UW ran the table in the Pac-12, and if they were forced to play the same team twice, which Texas isn't having to do, which Michigan isn't having to do.
I mean, Texas isn't because their loss was to a team not in their conference.
No, their loss was to Oklahoma.
Oh, right.
Like nobody else is having
I'm
to.
thinking of Alabama.
Nobody is having to
Texas.
prove it. Does that make sense? Michigan doesn't have to prove it against Ohio State.
Yeah.
And to give Ohio State the benefit of the doubt because of reasons, like when you look at mutual, again, taking away the actual statistical value of it, right? Which you would assume that the committee is looking at, but wins to wins, apples to apples, the only other team that really would have an argument is Alabama, really. But Alabama, this is under the scenario that Alabama loses. Ohio State beat Notre Dame and then lost to Michigan. Like, they're not good wins. They're from Michigan and Ohio State. They're not really good wins. Texas has a good win, but also Texas has a worse loss. So, do you understand the scenario that I'm talking about?
I do. Again,
I don't think it would happen. But anyway, I think people are being a little bit down on this game. I think Oregon has been dominant. It's going to come down a lot to, at the end of that game, Oregon figured out, holy shit, we can throw deep on this team. And is between Estien's growth and the secondary, like the defense looked pretty opportunistically good against Wazoo.
I don't think that Wazoo necessarily did enough to take advantage of UW's inability to defend deep passes.
But when Cam Ward held the ball for a long time, he got sacked.
He did.
The pass rush was there.
Yeah, guess who leads the nation in getting sacked the fewest?
Oregon?
Yeah.
I mean, they get the ball out quickly. But, like, if Bo Nix has time, I don't know. We'll see about Asa Turner if he's back. I would assume that he won't be. But you do
have... Bigilanen played a little bit on Saturday. We'll see how much he plays. But to me, the issue is it's the corner spot opposite Jabbar Muhammad.
Elijah Jackson's
a very good tackler, which is why they like to play him.
Yes.
But he is very vulnerable to deep passes.
I thought the tackling was the best it has been all year against Wazoo.
It's been the best, and it was the best it's been in a long period of time. Thaddeus Dixon, though, is the better coverage corner, and he came in and had a sack. What they did on Saturday was they were playing a dime defense, and their base is essentially a nickel. They were bringing in Dixon as a third outside corner in those situations and bumping Mish Powell into the safety spot.
I think they are working on it. The defense has changed since that Oregon game. We'll see. I think Carson Bruner had some very nice tackles against Wazoo.
Oh, he's got to start.
If they can tackle crisply against Oregon, really it's about if they force 5 punts and a pick six, like we were talking about a different game. But like similarly to the Seahawks in that scenario, they don't need to force 5 punts and a pick six. They need to force 3 punts.
My hope is they force a punt.
I mean, Oregon State, I don't think. No, I think they did eventually. But
Oregon did punt twice in the first 2 games on the first drive of each half. But then, the reason the Huskies won the game, was that Oregon missed on 2 4th downs.
But they also they forced those 4th downs.
They did.
UW got a little bit lucky in that scenario, but there were scenarios also that Oregon had to gain more yards in the game because they were playing from behind. It's not exactly like game flow.
We're playing that far from behind.
They were down 11 in the third quarter.
Yeah. They also led in the fourth quarter for most of it, right?
Yes.
When did they take the lead?
Until the very end. But UW had the ball at the 1 yard line. Like, there were a lot of scenarios that UW won that game comfortably. And there was a scenario that Oregon won the game, picks up the 4th down, and wins that game comfortably.
Yeah.
UW had the largest lead of the game. Like, I don't...
Yards per play, or UW was better.
Against Oregon?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And just ran less plays. If this offense looks like the offense that we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen it in a while. And I think that's why people are...
We did see it against USC, but USC is very
It wasn't, though.
defensive.
It wasn't that. We saw it against USC because we could run the ball against USC. Dylan Johnson ran for 265 yards.
We passed the ball pretty easily against USC, too.
It's still picking up like a 3rd and 18. I don't know. Dylan Johnson is not going to run for 265 yards against Oregon. This offense has to run like it can run. And if it does, they will have a chance against Oregon. If they can force a few punts, I have enough faith in this UW defense to get off the field a couple of times that I just want it to be a good game. That's it. I just want it to be a fun game that comes down to the very end. If it's like 2 years ago, that was a fun game, came down to the very end. Earlier this year, fun game, came down to the very end. Let's just see that again and then see where it takes us, because we're in unprecedented territory. If UW wins, can you imagine how much fun it would be Saturday just being like, not even worrying about it?
I can, because it happened in 20. Oh, I guess we.
No,
we
it didn't.
We
We stressed until that
yeah.
morning. We stressed until that morning, just being like, we're good. The 3 slot is locked in, and it's gonna be, look, maybe Georgia loses and it's playing Georgia, whatever. But like, if that's the only thing that we have to think about, that would be an amazing thing to think about. And if they do lose to Oregon, it is very frustrating that there isn't a 12-team playoff, but also it'll have been an incredible season, and they will still have a very good team on the other end of it.
And this will be a de facto playoff game. That's what this is essentially shaping up as. I mean, that's one of the things about the 12-team playoff, is it will reduce the importance of games like this. But now they are paramount.
It increases the importance of more games, though. It reduces the...
I suppose.
It reduces...
You can't be out of it because you lose 2 games.
Yes.
So Oregon being a 9.5-point favorite, according to ESPN stats and info, it's tied for the 7th largest line for a rematch since 1978's FCS split, in a situation where the underdog beat the favorite in the first meeting. Why is that the case? Well, since the Huskies won, Oregon has won by an average of 26 points per game. The Huskies have won by an average of 6.5 points per game. And if you look at the common opponents, which are the other 4 Pac-12 North teams, plus Arizona State, USC, and Utah, which each of these teams played 4 of those games at home, 3 on the road. Oregon was plus 27.4 points per game against common opponents. UW was plus 9.4. Not great.
I hate you.
Bo Nix has become the Heisman favorite. This is no longer, sadly, like that first game, really a Heisman battle, unless Jaden Daniels really goes off the rails. He's second in the odds at plus 110, Bo Nix minus 130 per ESPN bet.
I think Penix could still possibly play his way into it.
Plus 1,500. I mean, you would have to have a monster game, and Daniels would have to really struggle. Mentioned Bo Nix's perfection. His 79% completion percentage would break the NCAA single-season record of 77% set by Mac Jones. 9.7 yards per attempt.
Mac Jones?
Yeah, Mac Jones.
Oh, no. Maybe don't, Bo. Maybe don't.
He's thrown
just throw the ball away a couple times.
He's thrown just 2 interceptions, second among qualifying quarterbacks to Penn State's Drew Aller, who's thrown but 1, and his second to Jaden Daniels in QBR. Mentioned the sacks just once during the last 6 games, 5 times all season. The troubling thing about Rome Odunze, Troy Franklin's stats are better. He ranks 3rd nationally in receiving yards, 1 spot ahead of Odunze, 14 touchdowns tied for 2nd, 1 ahead of Odunze, and number 1 in Pac-12 receiving APA, where Odunze actually 3rd behind Arizona's Tetairoa McMillan. They both had huge games in the first meeting. Troy Franklin had 8 catches and 11 targets for 154 yards and a touchdown. Odunze 8 catches and 12 targets for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tez Johnson, whom Nix considers a brother, is closing in on 1,000 yards, has 9 receiving TDs. Nobody else has more than 380 receiving yards, although neither does UW, as much as we think of this as a more balanced group. Oregon leads the Pac-12 in EPA per play on rushing plays as well as passes. Bucky Irving leads a platoon at running back with Jordan James. Both of those running backs have 10 touchdowns. Nix has run for 6. Despite fewer carries, Jordan James actually has more EPA, but they rank 3rd and 4th in the conference with Dylan Johnson, the only running back ahead of them. Each averaged just under 6 yards per carry against the Huskies, and each scored a TD in that game. Oregon defense, which I don't think we mentioned last time around, is coached by defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoy.
Oh, I'm aware.
Ranks 2nd in the Pac-12 in both EPA allowed per play and FPI efficiency. They're 1st against the pass, 4th against the rush. The Huskies' 6.8 yards per play against them were bettered only by Washington State, which also Cam Ward had the most passing yards against Oregon.
I'm telling you, Cam Ward, if you cherry pick Wazoo games, this was a nice win.
Yes. Penix's 316 yards were second most allowed. Dylan Johnson was the only running back to run for 100 yards against Oregon this season. Their other 100-yard game against them was their former quarterback Tyler Shuck in Texas Tech.
Wow.
Which is a weirdly close game in hindsight, knowing everything we know about Oregon now. No Ducks player has more than 5 sacks, but they still rank 4th with 32 as a team in the Pac-12. Now, if you're looking for a place the Huskies might win this game, it's the place they ultimately won the game last time around, special teams. They ranked 124th in FPI efficiency in special teams, 100 spots behind the Huskies. I still don't quite understand the entire magnitude of this, but despite becoming the all-time leading Oregon scorer, fifth-year kicker Camden Lewis, 10 of 16 on field goals, 5 of 11 beyond 30 yards.
Let me ask you, what if Dan Lanning has it? Dan Lanning. He's Troy Dannon.
That's like calm down south. Dan Lanning.
What if Dan Lanning has in his head? Everybody, look, drunk Seahawks fan, was like, our coach lost us the game last time. And I was like,
I hope so.
What if he has in his head? What if he gets Brandon Staley'd?
I don't think he has the rest of the season from what I can tell. But
this is different. This is a rematch.
I agree.
This is people are all of a sudden he's getting Brandon Staley and he's getting Ryan Dade. If look, Ryan Dade can't beat, team from up north. What if there's a situation like that where all of a sudden
if there's a gif of Dan Lanning walking off the field similar to Ryan Day on Saturday,
needs more hair dye. But what if instead of situations where he should be going for it, he gets a little bit tight?
I hope so.
And kicks field goals, punts, things like that. Does stuff that is less. I mean, again, Dan Lanning made every decision correct against UW. There was no decision that he made wrong. I'm sure there probably was. But as far as going for it on 4th downs, he made all of the key decisions correctly. Sometimes you don't get them. What if that happens again? What if it happens one time and then all of a sudden they get tight? That it is definitely a place. I actually think none of this stuff matters. I think the only thing that matters is UW going to score efficiently. I think that is it. But if UW does score efficiently, Oregon can still win if UW scores efficiently. But then that is where this stuff comes in, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
None of this other stuff matters. Their defense, their pass rush, Troy Franklin, nothing else matters. Because if Michael Penix is playing like Michael Penix played against Wazoo, the game is over.
I agree.
So it is UW an efficient offense?
But this was the case going into the USC game, too. And granted, again, USC has a very poor defense. Oregon has a very good defense. All of a sudden,
Oregon trades defenses with USC. I feel so much better about this game.
But even with opponent adjustments, Penix played really well against USC, and the offense played really well. The other thing on the special teams, they have the worst average start position after kickoffs in the Pac-12 by 1.5 yards per kickoff.
It's kind of strange.
So I don't know if I didn't dig deeper into the numbers. I feel like there was
there could be a Daniel Nata game though.
Yeah,
I kept waiting for him to break one against Wazoo.
He looked close. Was there I feel like there was a play where they ended up starting. Oh, because somebody touched out of bounds, or they were trying to get a kickoff out of bounds in that Oregon game. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't think you are.
Okay. Well, that happened at one point this season for the Huskies. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hopeful because of those USC stats. I'm hopeful because we've seen Michael Penix before. I'm excited to watch this UW offense. I do not want to watch Oregon play offense ever again in my entire life.
Well, I've got some bad news for you.
If UW doesn't win this game, I will not be tuning in to whatever playoff semifinal they're in. I'm done. I'm done. If they're down, I'll tune in. The allure of watching Oregon lose will be the only thing that will get me through. But like, this is, I need a break from playing Oregon. I thought we were done. I thought we were finished with this, but it's been a collision course all season. Ever since UW and Oregon played, UW came out victorious the last time through. This is it. This is the Pac-12. This is the conference. They've been together hand in hand for a couple of years navigating the situation post USC leaving.
Your definition of a couple of years based on the 2022 matchups between these two teams and the July 1st, 2022 USC decision to leave the Pac and the UCLA announcement they're leaving the Pac-12 leaves much to be desired.
These two teams have been on a collision course all season ever since that game in Seattle. We saw it when it happened. You could see that these two teams were at a totally different level, and probably a totally different level than most Pac-12 teams we've seen over this time period, the entire history of the Pac-12. This UW team, this Oregon team, this is it. This is for the Pac-12. This is for the history of the Pac-12. It would be incredible to end up as victors in the last ever Pac-12 championship game. It'll come down to Michael Penix Jr., what he looks like, to whether they're getting the ball to Rome Odunze, working off of that. To me, that is it. Hopefully, Oregon special teams have to be a factor. If I'm being honest, though, percentage chance of victory, I said 35% on Saturday. I'm saying 30% today.
I think that's about right. I think the other thing, we mentioned this going into the USC game, like saying that turnovers are an important factor in a game is pretty reductive. But in a situation like this where both offenses are so efficient, just one, empty drive like that can make a huge difference.
A hold, not even a turnover, a hold.
I don't believe that a hold would force a stop.
Not necessarily, but it would be a lot better. Like, that's what happened with Oregon against Oregon State when they did turn the ball over. It's like, can we get a fucking holding call? Something like that. Like, anything that sets them back. I mean, that's hopefully how this UW defense will function in this game, that they're not giving up the big plays, right? Because the killer for Oregon State was the touchdown with 54 seconds left or whatever. This isn't in Oregon. This isn't in Washington. Hopefully the cheating will be mitigated. The clock stuff that I saw Oregon do on Friday will be mitigated. Like,
they still can fake injuries, though.
I hope that they're in the position to have to fake injuries, because that means it's close enough. They didn't fake injuries against Oregon State because they didn't need to.
Touche.
But I just want it to be a close game and to have fun watching this.
I mean, the other thing we talked about the last game about, probably the biggest UW Oregon game ever given the stakes. Heisman may not be in play anymore, so that element is off the table as compared to back then. But for these two teams to play for the first time in the conference championship, it wasn't possible for a long period of time. And look, yes, we're both going to the Big Ten. There's a lot of good schools in the Big Ten. The odds of playing Oregon again in a conference championship anytime soon are not that great.
Do we know how that's going to be structured?
They'll take the two best teams.
Thank God. It's so fucking
dumb. There are no divisions in the Big Ten going forward, so that won't be.
It's nice that everybody's growing up.
An issue. But just like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, whoever else, like the odds of both of us being the two best teams in the conference in the same year are pretty low.
It'll happen eventually.
Over a long enough time period. But, this is a big one.
The stakes almost certainly can't get higher, though, because in a 12-team playoff, if there's one game that matters
unless
that much,
they play each other in the playoffs somehow.
Yes. So that would be the scenario. But, like, precluding that, this is it.
Well, I hope we're recording an emergency pod on Friday night. On that note,
thanks for listening.
Thanks.